Good evening and welcome to Turner Classic Movies. I'm Dave Karger. November is Trans Awareness Month, and we're commemorating this occasion with 2 nights of trans images on film, tonight and next Monday. I'm very happy to be joined by Willow Caitlin McClay, the co-author of Corpses, Fools, and Monsters. Willow, thanks for being here.
This is lovely. I've loved Turner Classic Movies my entire life, and I'm really excited to talk about these movies that we're programming tonight.
Oh, that's great. Before we talk about our first film tonight, which is Robert Altman's Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy Dean, I'd love to ask you just in a general sense, when you and your co-author of the book, Caden Mark Gardner, who's going to be joining me next week, by the way, when you were looking into these films and writing about them, what were some general trends that you noticed when you were exploring trans representation in film over the decades?
Well, with our book, it started as a series of conversations that Kate and I had with one another that we published online called Body Talk. And when we were doing those, we were looking at some of the most popular films to feature a trans character or a trans subject, movies like The Silence of the Lambs and Boys Don't Cry. And we came across this trend in these movies where trans characters were usually slotted into one of three categories, either a corpse, a fool, or a monster, which is where the title of the book comes from. And that obviously marginalizes trans people on film. But throughout our research, we also found characters and personalities and actors and people who worked in film who stretched the definition of that. Trans people are really diverse on film, but usually we're seen in fragments in the 20th century. And what happens is when we see the full totality of these fragments, a fuller picture forms where we don't have a full scope of something like transgender cinema, like that's still developing, I think. But when we were looking at the films that we eventually covered for this book, and we did cover a lot of films, um, we we really keyed in on some of the stereotypes that were endemic to our representation, while also discovering some films which challenged our ideas of that stereotype. And one of those films is the movie that we're about to play, Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy Dean.
Yeah, and you and I are going to dance around this a little bit in the intro to this film because it's a bit of a mild spoiler if, for people who have never seen this movie before as to what the trans representation in this film turns out to be. So we're not going to talk very explicitly about it until after the movie, but it does seem like this is a film that handles the topic in a much more humane way than a lot of films of the era.
There's kind of a martyr complex in a lot of trans representation, but you don't get that sense with this character. She's lived a full, really beautiful, detailed life full of mistakes and regrets and hopes and dreams. And you really get to feel for this particular character, and it's a character that I love.
For anyone who's never seen Come Back to the Five and Dime, it's got a great cast. Sandy Dennis, Cher, Karen Black, Kathy Bates, and it's this group of people who were James Dean fans 20 years earlier, and 20 years after his death, they reconvene, and things are learned, secrets are revealed. You look at the filmmaking and you can tell it's a Robert Altman film, but the cast here is obviously very exciting, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, the cast is absolutely phenomenal. And I think more than just even it being a trans film, it's a great film about women in the 80s. I think that all of these women are really well observed and detailed. The 80s were kind of like this macho era for filmmaking in a lot of ways, but I think that there was also a lot of actresses at the time who were really special, and a lot of them are in this movie. This is one of my favorite performances from Cher, one of my favorite ones from Karen Black. And we didn't mention Mark Patton either, who plays a character in one portion of the film, who's also really wonderful. His career kind of didn't take off to the extent that a lot of these actresses did, but I do want to give him a shout out as well.
Mark Patton is great, and he's also the subject of a fascinating documentary, as I'm sure you know, called Scream Queen, because of his performance in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films,
Yeah.
which became quite infamous. But yes, a really terrific performance, and there was great promise there that you can see in this film. Well, okay, Willow, let's watch the movie, and then we'll talk about it even in more detail afterwards, okay?
Okay.
Here from 1982, directed by Robert Altman, Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy Dean. I'm back with Willow Caitlin McClay, the co author of Corpses, Fools, and Monsters, to talk a little bit more about this fantastic film. And you and Caden, your co author, call this performance by Karen Black one of the best, if not the best, performance by a cisgender actor playing a trans role. What do you admire so much about what Karen Black, and Mark Patton for that matter, did in this film?
I think that one of the most important things that Karen Black does is that she almost ignores the fact that this character is trans and she just looks at her as just another woman. I think that the trans element kind of trips up a lot of actors when they're getting ready to perform a trans role. They think like, oh, what sort of specific thing should a trans person actor behave? But Karen Black kind of ignores that and just focuses on who Joanne is and how she is reacting to all of her friends in the past. It's almost like the past informs this character more than her gender identity does. But her gender identity is obviously very important. And in addition to Karen Black just being so specific and so beautifully attuned to the emotions that her character is experiencing, Altman uses the two-way mirror to communicate how Mark Patton's performance influences Karen Black's performance.
One of the scenes that I found really fascinating in this film is when Joanne first comes back to the store and is walking around kind of hesitantly. And you describe it really eloquently in your book. What strikes you so much about that scene where this trans character is visiting her cisgender space for the first time after so many years, and how Karen Black plays it?
I think that she plays it very beautifully. I think that when she first arrives, she's feeling a sense of power in her anonymousness. You can feel that Karen Black is almost on the edge of like wanting to come out to her friends, but she's also indulging in the fact that they don't know who she is. She's just kind of feeling everything about her past just kind of fled back into her. And this is traumatic for her in one ways, but in another way, it's healing for her because she's back in this space that was so complicated for her 20 years ago. And now she could move about it more comfortably. There's a really great moment where she stumbles onto the shrine of James Dean that is still there as she remembers 20 years ago. And it's almost an unconscious thing where her shoulders kind of fall. It's so attuned to, I think, specific transgender experiences of maybe a trans person leaving home and coming back.
And how about the ultimate reveal in the film that Joe was actually the father of the child?
Mhm.
That adds a whole other layer to the proceedings that you just couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, I think that modern viewers sometimes get a little bit tripped up on one line of dialogue that Joanne has in this movie where she talks about regrets. And I don't think that she is speaking specifically about a regret with her transition, but the regret of everything that she gave up for her transition. And I think that that is obviously the fact that she couldn't be a parent to this child because she did have to leave home. She did lose contact with her friends. And I think the transition is this beautiful thing for trans people and it's obviously vital. But what we don't see in movies so much is the collateral damage that comes with it. And I think that this movie really taps into that. You can obviously see that it's difficult for Joanne to have experienced this loss of having, missed this opportunity to raise this child, to have never even seen this child before. And that influences the emotional dynamic between her and Sandy Dennis's character. And I think that there's a lot of just really, really great stuff between those two.
Well, Willow, it's been fascinating to hear your insights on this film. What do you say you stick around and we do one more movie together?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, great. Stick around because after the break, Willow and I will be back to discuss a 1971 ensemble drama that features Andy Warhol superstar Candy Darling.
Next on TCM, some of my best friends are, then Vertigo, and later, Funeral Parade of Roses. Things get thorny on TCM tonight.